First, before we get started, I wanted to ask, so how did everyone hear about this event? Did anyone get one of these stuck on their door, and is that why you came? Can you raise your hand if you did? No one, okay.
Oh, wow.
Did you hear about it through a flyer, one of those like card stocks? It has like, trees on it and stuff like that? Anyone? No? And then who were like invited by someone that they know from here? Okay, pretty much. Looks like pretty much everyone. Cool. All right, so yeah. Okay, declare emergency. So we are a nonviolent direct action group based here in DC. We've been doing direct action since December. We did roadblocks on December 7th, 8th, and 9th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. And then we did some roadblocks last month also, three roadblocks. So our demand is pretty simple. It's for President Biden to declare a climate emergency. It's something that he should have done on day one. It's a very simple demand, but that's the point. We need a simple demand so that we can get a win and help inspire hopefully hundreds of other people to also come and join us. So I'm here to tell you why we did it and why we think that you should also join us on the roads. So I'll show some pictures really quick of the actions that we've done. So this was in December. We blocked the 395, the exit there onto New York Avenue. We did it 3 times in a row. And this was last month. We blocked, I think, where was that? Was that DuPont Circle?
Yeah.
It was DuPont in Connecticut. It was really cold that day. It was horribly cold, so we cut up like some camping mats and we sat on those. Okay, so the climate, it's a fucking emergency. So let's get into it. So I'm from California originally. I was born and raised there, and I grew up fearing wildfires. About an hour and a half to the east of the city where I grew up is a city called Paradise, which burned to the ground in 2018. And I met a lot of refugees from that fire, people who had lost their homes. A lot of people had insurance, on their homes, but a lot of people didn't, and a lot of renters, were just left without a home. And I had to drive back through there for work several times. And I remember one time, I was listening to a podcast about climate change, which probably wasn't the best idea. And I was just enraged, driving through because it looked like the surface of the moon. All you could see were just the outlines of people's houses, melted cars, in the front yard. And it was just a horrible, landscape to look at. So that made a huge impact on me. And in 2020, I started kind of researching climate change a little bit more. I didn't really know how bad it was, and what I learned really horrified me. I became really depressed, and I didn't go out of my house for a couple months just to get food and go to work, because I felt like things are so bad. What's the point? What's the point of trying? Until I saw some videos of people doing civil disobedience. And I saw them sitting in roads, blocking traffic, getting people to pay attention, trying to force cities, universities to declare a climate emergency, to take action on it, to take it seriously, like the fucking emergency that it actually is. And when I saw that, there was one video in particular. It was a young guy. He was 20, I think he's 23. And he blocked an intersection, and to see him, the cars would back up and he would stand up and he would walk towards the car and sit down again to keep it blocked for as long as possible. And it just really impacted me, seeing that fearlessness that he had to go out, even though someone came and stole his water bottle, people were making fun of him, but he didn't care. He did it anyway. And it really made a huge impact on me. So in August, excuse me, I'm really nervous. I always get nervous speaking in front of people, but I think it's important to do anyway. Thank you. So in August, I came out to Florida where he was doing a march across the state, and he was getting arrested. So I got arrested with him 3 times. I blocked a highway, tried to block a highway once unsuccessfully, and then what was the other one? We got arrested at a school handing out flyers to high school kids. So then came to DC, and I've been arrested 7 times, so a total of 10 times, I think. Spent a week in jail in Florida, which was horrible, not fun, but it was a really interesting experience to be able to be in that, space with the people who suffer from a horrific criminal justice system, and to actually see like firsthand, what's going on. So it was a really powerful experience. Okay, so I'll talk about I'll talk about the emergency. And then we'll talk about what we need to do. So just want to give a trigger warning. This is a really disturbing part of the presentation. Climate change is a very serious thing, but it's a lot more disturbing than sometimes we think about. But there's a quote from James Baldwin that I really love that is, "Not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced." So we need to face the climate emergency head on. So this is a picture of Greece last year. There were massive wildfires. And I would encourage you to look up on the New York Times, there's like a 50-second video of people in a boat. You might have seen it, like going off they're trying to escape the coast, and just like the coastline, just insane, just a wall of fire. And this was a Coast Guard official. She said, "We're talking about the apocalypse. I don't know how to describe it." What was? The island, yep. Completely gone. So this is the big quote. This is Sir David King. He's the former chief scientific advisor to the UK. And probably the most important thing to say about Sir David King is that he's retired. So the climate science industry and the climate scientists, group, they have a lot to risk. They're educated, they're academics, and so people that are retired, scientists that are retired, have more like freedom of expression. They don't really care anymore because they're not like in the rat race. So Sir David King is retired, and this is what he said last year. He said, "What we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity." What we do in the next 3 to 4 years will determine the future of humanity. And he said that in early 2021. Okay, so who here has heard of the Paris Climate Accord? Has everyone heard of it? Just about everyone. So for those who haven't, in 2015, governments from around the world came to a conference called the Paris Climate Accords, and scientists advised them. There was a panel of like 2,000 scientists. They advised governments to pledge to keep global heating below a certain level. And that level was 1.5 degrees Celsius rise since pre-industrial times. So that's what the scientists said, that we can make 1.5. However, in April 22nd of last year, a bombshell article came out that went viral because it was a confession, basically. And it was written by 3 of the world's top scientists. And they wrote that at the time of the Paris Climate Accord, not one scientist that they knew of believed that that limit was possible, 1.5 C. The story goes that the reason why they said that we can make 1.5 C is because past 1.5 is where the island nations will be flooded and a lot of the global south will be unlivable. So they didn't want to tell people in those countries that they were going to die. So to talk a little bit more about like why we know that scientists, climate scientists, when they say something publicly to us, they're kind of bullshitting us a little bit. So this is one of the world's top scientists also. He's Kevin Anderson. He's former director of the Tyndall Center for Climate Research, and he said this at COP26 last year.
You have been criticizing your colleagues for not speaking truth to power. Why is that?
I'm particularly critical of some, not all, some of the senior academics, and other ones as well, but mostly the senior academics.
But you don't want to name them?
Not yet. No, I don't want to name them. But and often it's because they're doing this for well-meaning reasons, but to me it's really misguided. So in private, they will tell me things from their work about how bad the situation is, and then in public they will say something that is much more hopeful, that is not supported by their evidence. And sometimes the difference between those two is huge. They will also promote technologies which they don't think will work at the scale that they have in their models, but they put them in their models because it gives them an output that means they don't have to significantly question the current political economic framework or paradigm. And the reason that some of them make is that we can't change the paradigm, and therefore we have to sort of change our assumptions or massage the language we use to make it look more appealing. Now, that might be appropriate if you're an NGO, if you're a spin doctor of a political party. To me, that is completely inappropriate for academics. Our job, and it's quite a simple remit, is to do our job, our work, our research carefully, recognise we get things wrong occasionally and change them when we do, but then communicate it clearly and bluntly to whoever wants to listen. We should not be there to spin a cheery story. We should not be there to make it attractive to the NGOs or the policymakers. It's only the content of our message as academics that really matters. But I think we have been very dangerous. We have been spinning a tale which fits with the political dialogue for far too long on this issue. And as time has passed and the challenge has got harder and harder, we have spun an increasingly imaginary tale rather than saying what our science is telling us. And I hear this repeatedly. It's not, this is just occasionally. As an example of this, I was at an event recently when the person, when she was speaking, was saying, things are challenging, but there are things that we can do, and she was explaining that. And then afterwards on the train, she put her head in her hands, and excuse the language, she just said, "We're fucked. We're absolutely fucked." Now, I don't think she should have used that language in the seminar, but I think she should have expressed that feeling through her research in the seminar. She shouldn't wait and say that privately to me on the train. And if we misinform the policymakers, if we misinform the public, how can they develop policies that are in line with...
Cut off a little early there. So what this lady did is obscene. That's what it is. It's obscene. She's lying to people about the greatest injustice in human history. And that's not just the one, that's the majority of them. So there was a peer-reviewed paper that came out last year, I believe. It's called The Future of the Human Climate Niche. And it tells us, so the human climate niche, it's a certain range of temperature that humans can exist in. Once we go like above it or below it, like we can't live. So it's a small band of temperature, and that's the band that we live in. So this article, it went as far as to tell us like what's actually going to happen at these new temperatures that we're heading towards. And this is probably the most disturbing part. So scientists advise governments to pledge that they would keep global heating below 2 degrees C. That was like the absolute upper limit at the 2015 Paris Accord. And this is what's going to happen at 2C. At 2C, desert conditions are going to go from 1%, which is like the Sahara, the Sahel, to 19% of the global land surface. And that's in South America, that's in Africa, Europe. Italy will be desert, a lot of the middle United States. And 2C is coming in a matter of decades. So last year there was COP26, right? And governments pledged once again for like the 26th time that they were going to keep temperatures below a certain level. This report here, it tells us new national climate pledges combined with other mitigation measures put the world on track for a global temperature rise of 2.7 degrees Celsius by the end of the century. That is like indescribable how horrific that is. At 2 degrees, there will be 1,000 million people on the move because they won't be able to live where they're living today because it'll be too hot, that they just won't be able to survive. And when people move en masse, we know what happens. They don't just get up nicely and move to another part. There will be social breakdown on a massive scale. Because what happens when, large groups of people move, like for example in Syria, there were 5 million refugees and 500,000 people died. So at 1 billion, 100 million people will be dead. And we can also look at the Congo, right? In 2000, it was the biggest conflict since World War II. 5 million people were slaughtered, and 2 million people were sexually assaulted, or raped. And that's what happens when society collapses. So we can't even make it to 2 degrees C, like the other quote said. This is from Nature. So it's not, like Joe Schmo's climatefacts.org. It's Nature. And this article came out last year. It says the most optimistic scenario is still insufficient to limit global warming to 2 degrees C. Okay, so this is how people usually think of the climate. It's like a ball on a hill. So it's slanted, right? It's rolling, it's getting worse, it's picking up a little speed. But we still have time to catch it, right? It's just going to be a little faster. We're just going to need to run a little harder, and we can catch it. This is actually what the climate is like. So the story, right? A little boy kicks a ball. It starts rolling off a hill. The boy runs to catch it. How does that story end? It's only going to end in one of 2 ways, right? Either he catches it or he doesn't, and the ball rolls off the hill. So if he tries to catch it at point 1, he's not going to get it. He goes to point 2, the same thing. Getting to point 2 is the same as getting to point 1. What he needs to do is he needs to get it at point 3. And if we don't catch the climate right now where it is at point 3, it's going to roll off the hill and we'll never ever be able to catch it again. It's kind of like the doctor telling you have cancer, right? And you have 6 months to live. Past that 6 months, that's it. Bang, you're dead, And that's what it's like with the climate. So if we try really hard, right, we put some policies in place, we write to our politicians, our Congress people, we make phone calls, we go really far, we're going to get to point 1, it's still, not enough. The same with point 2, maybe we do some protests, we do some rallies and marches, it's still not going to be enough. We need to get to point 3. So here's the reason why, temperature isn't going to stop at 2 degrees. These are the tipping points, and we've already crossed some of them. So the tipping points, it's exactly what it sounds like. It tips off an edge, and then you can't ever get it back. We've passed it with the coral reefs. The coral reefs are pretty much gone. We're not getting them back, guys. That's pretty much it. The Arctic is definitely going to melt, completely melt by about 2030 to 2035. It probably will be sooner than that, though. The permafrost is thawing. The Greenland ice sheet will probably also be gone. And then the Amazon. The Amazon is 17 to 18% cut down right now. And scientists are saying that if it gets to 20%, it's going to trigger a feedback loop where it'll just continue to die and it won't ever regrow. The Arctic and the Amazon are like the lungs of our planet. If we don't have them, we can't breathe. And when the Arctic goes, then that means there's the Atlantic circulation. So the Arctic pushes, cold air, it mixes around the different temperature of water in the oceans. That's going to slow down. And when that slows down, that means we're going to get the same weather for longer periods. And when we get the same weather for longer periods, that means that the crops are going to start dying all over the world. They're already dying today. When the crops die, then that means there's no food in the supermarket and everything just goes pretty quickly from there.
I just have
Yeah, yeah.
I was just wondering where you got the information so that if I'm speaking to someone, I can refer them to the source.
Absolutely,
Because
yeah.
I think a lot of times we're talking about this kind of information, unless you have the source the data is coming from, the person is not going to necessarily believe it.
Right, definitely. So if you leave your name and your email address or your phone number, we'll send you all the references for this talk. Definitely, yeah. So this is the reality. The climate emergency isn't about whales and dolphins and penguins. The climate emergency is about our survival. The survival of you guys right here, the people in this room. You know, I mean, are we gonna make it to our, if we're in our 20s or 30s, like, are we gonna make it to our 50th birthday? That's the question, you know? I mean, are we gonna make it to our 40th birthday? What we do in the next 2 to 3 years, right? Because it was last year. 2 to 3 years will determine the future of humanity. It's the greatest crime in human history. And the reality of it is that our planet is like a gas chamber right now. People are putting these gases into our atmosphere, and people are making decisions. People are writing laws, right? Companies are lobbying the government. They're doing this intentionally, even knowing what's going to happen, that billions of people, or at least hundreds of millions, are going to die and be suffering. So that means that it's the greatest crime in human history. Okay, so just before we go on, I'd like us to take like a minute of silence and think about, you know, what we've talked about here. So I'm going to time it. All right, thank you guys. So at this point, I'd like to take a couple comments. We don't have a lot of time, but if a few folks would like to say a few words about like how they're feeling right now after everything that we've talked about, raise your hand. Yeah, right here.
I feel horrible.
Yeah.
I feel so bad being human. But that's also bringing up in me, like, waiting on other people to declare emergency. How can I declare? Sure, take a mic. You should not have given me a microphone. But how do we declare an emergency in our own life in a way that I feel like is the subtext of this conversation, which is like, yo, there's stuff to do, and if we're waiting on other people's, other than civil disobedience, what do we do locally? How do we connect with each other in a way that actually supports like our local neighbors' futures, not just focusing on the largest, but the smallest at the same time? Yeah, so that's just making me think.
That's great. Right here, yeah.
Well, I've heard, I'm not surprised, first of all, because I was familiar with a lot of the information to begin with. So I feel hopeful as a result of you organizing this dialogue, because I felt a need for this kind of thing happening for a while. And part of what I struggle with, I think like a lot of us do, is how do I take care of all the things I need to in my own life, making a living, supporting my kids, and find things that I could do with the limited amount of time and energy I have. So I'm glad you're doing this.
Thank you. Yeah, last one right here. Actually, could we hear from someone that hasn't spoken yet? So would that be all right? Okay, sorry. What's that? Okay, sorry, cool.
Okay, unplanned. I don't know how to even find the words. Okay. You know, I personally really believe like the journey to God is a very, very personal, intimate journey for every soul. But just for me personally, in my prayer life, the biggest thing that's been on my heart right now has been praying for sustainability and the healing of the earth. So really just like getting out of religious debating, like regarding like, so basically like the biggest message in my heart has been like, no, bring heaven down to earth, like focus on earth. So so that's been the biggest thing on my heart. And so I'm like, my body's kind of like shaking right now because it's like, oh, answered prayers. Blah. So I'm feeling shaky, I'm feeling nervous, but I'm like, thank you. Yeah, I'm like, this is a beautiful story here, Alexandria. Yeah, anyway, I'm happy, I'm just grateful to be here. So yeah, that's all.
I'm just wondering if you have a group in Baltimore where my son is that I can tell him about you.
Yeah. Whoops, got them a little tangled. There we go. Cool. So we don't have a group in Baltimore yet. We are trying to organize the Northeast, but right now we're trying to focus in DC, and I'll get into a little bit of why we're trying to focus in DC, but if you leave your info at the front with... Okay, cool. Awesome. Yeah, we'll get that to you. Great. Okay, so what we must do, thank you everyone for sharing. Yeah, and the things that you guys said resonated with me too. You know, I think like this isn't anymore about like activism and feeling good. It's about something spiritual, you know. It's about like what are we doing as human beings right now at this moment when we know hundreds of generations in the future people are going to be looking at us and saying what, you know, did we do at this moment. So because what we must do is like no other thing that we've ever done in all of human history. The changes that we have to make are so profound.
Yeah.
So to see like what it is that we need to do, we're going to go back to Kevin Anderson for a couple minutes to talk about like why it is that things are the way that they are right now.
I have participated in a study that tries to figure out why real action is blocked over 3 decades, 4 decades, 5 decades in regards to the climate crisis so far. What are the results and what can we learn from that?
Well, that was a really interesting piece of work. It was very challenging. There were 23 authors, I think, and we tried to understand through different levels of expertise, what we call them lenses. So some people looked at psychology, some people looked at technical issues, other people looked at issues of governance. So we looked at 9 different ways as to why it is, reasons as to why it is we may not have bent the emissions, why we haven't bent the emissions curve in the right direction. And our conclusion from this was fairly clear for all of these that power was absolutely at the centre of this. There is a power structure which is dominated by a relatively small group of people, which we called, in the paper, we called it the Davos cluster. And that this cluster, which actually is not that many people involved with it, but it does include what we might call the global mobile elites, the heads of many of the heads of our companies, the heads of our governments, the heads of our financial institutions, and indeed supported by some academics as well. And that this particular group held a lot of power in our society, but they were not a particularly large group. But their interest in holding that power was to maintain the power. It was not to respond to the challenges that we face, whether they're ecological challenges or some of the social challenges. And our judgment was that they were completely ill-equipped. These people could not change to help us address climate change, yet they talk as if they can. So then we started to say, well, where would the power come from? And what we were quite intrigued by there was it looks like there is a lot of discussion at the sort of grassroots, bottom-up level that is much more in line with what the science is calling for. And also, many more people are there. I mean, most of the population are not in Davos. It's a small percentage of the population. So if the rest of us actually start to mobilise the power we actually have, and engage also, we felt, much more with the research, the academic community, we could provide a different power structure, which was much more open to a wider group of people to be involved, rather than this very elite, top-down form of power. This is not to say that leaders aren't important. They are. But it's much more a relationship between bottom-up and top-down. And at the moment, we're dominated by this top-down, and they have failed, and they are ill-equipped and unable to respond to the climate challenge. They're locked into a mindset and a model that is complete. When it's caused the problem, it's not going to help us solve the problem. And so we needed much more of this sort of bottom-up leadership to help us break this impasse that we have today.
All right. So, bottom up, right? We're just normal people. You know, I'm assuming, you know, that you guys in this room are just normal people, don't have a lot of like political power, but the key is we have power together. If we get together, you know, each one of us on our own, recycling, taking shorter showers, you know, like biking, that only does so much. Right, guys, like we need a lot more than that, but we can't do those things just on our own, you know, just sitting in our bedroom, deciding whether we're going to go on, you know, get arrested or not. Like we have to do it together. Who here is from like the Alexandria area? Okay, a few. And then who is from like the DMV area in general? Cool. So you guys are from the same area, and this is it, coming together as a community, coming back together, meeting up again and again, talking about what the fuck are we gonna do, right? Like things are falling apart. Our planet is collapsing. So what are we gonna do? And that's where the Freedom Riders come in. So Freedom Riders, in the 1960s, they, all right, so 24 people got on 2 buses and went down into the Deep South. Right there, black and white. And what they were doing was enacting the law. There were civil rights laws that were written that said that interstate travel on buses had to be desegregated, but the states didn't like that, and so they had their own laws. So black and white people got on buses, they sat next to each other, they went down into the Deep South. The first bus that went down was firebombed. People were beaten up, reporters were beaten up. And 3 days later, another group of 24 people came down on buses that didn't have, you know, a direct connection with them. They just knew about what was happening, and they decided to come down too. And then after that, another 24 and another 24. And by the end of the summer, there were over 400 people in prison, and then they won. So they got the government to enforce the desegregation of interstate buses. So this is our model. This is how we do it. We keep the pressure up, we go again and again, we disrupt, and then we win. There's a book about it that I highly recommend by Raymond Arsenal, and then there's the documentary also on PBS. In the future, we're going to be putting on events where we'll show the full film, the full Freedom Riders film. It's beautiful. And here is, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and skip this clip, actually. Okay, so we have the other example of Insulate Britain. So Insulate Britain happened last year. It was a group of 100 people, it was about 100 people. They decided they weren't going to wait anymore for the big climate groups to do something, to actually do some shit. They were like, no, we're going to take it on our own, we're going to go ahead and do it. So they had a demand. The demand is for the UK government to insulate all the housing in Britain. And their tactic was to block roads. So 100 people block roads again and again for, it was like 4 weeks. In the first 3 weeks, they went from 0 to 90% name recognition in the UK. Everyone was talking about them. They were on the front page of the newspapers. They were on the TV news like 50 times. And like everyone was talking about them. Everyone hated them because they were blocking roads, blocking people's commutes, but people were talking about them. After the first 4 weeks, their policy had 72% support from the UK public, even though they hated their guts. They said, they have a point. So that's how you do it. And here's some pictures of them blocking roads, getting dragged away by the police. People young and old. And let's see, what else can I say? Cool. Okay, so the thing that they have in common, the Freedom Riders and Enslaved Britain and dozens of other social movements, are winnable demands. And this is straight out of like MLK and Gandhi. What they would do was they would get a winnable demand, they would win it, and then they would go on to the next demand. So it was sequential, it was specific demands, and they would go one after another. So that is what we're doing. Our demand is for Biden to declare a climate emergency, and it's winnable, right? So if they end up putting dozens of us in jail just because we want Biden to declare a climate emergency, it's not going to look too good for the president who said that he's the climate president. So that's our tactic. That's what we're doing. And the other thing about a win is that with the Freedom Riders, after they won, it inspired like thousands of movements and groups because they saw the ability for nonviolence to actually work. So that's the same thing. Right now, with the climate movement, we haven't had a win. We haven't actually had like a big win for some time. And that's what we need to do. We need to show people that this shit can work. The actions need to be highly disruptive. So in the history of like social movements, successful ones always combine disruption and sacrifice. When people are disrupted and then they see the disruptors being willing to sacrifice themselves, even their safety, even their own lives, that changes the world. It forces things into the public consciousness. It forces people to pay attention. And that's what we're going for. And mobilization. So we're going to be holding talks all around the DMV area. We're going to be distributing tons of flyers, getting the word out there, and building from the actions that we've done. I'm going to skip this video too, but you guys can watch it on our YouTube channel. Okay. All right, so now I'm going to introduce Paul, who has also joined Declare Emergency, and he's going to talk a little bit about why he did it. He was arrested, went to jail with us. We spent the night in jail. And yeah, so I'll invite up Paul.
Hey everybody. Before I start, I just want to make sure everybody knows I'm not a fire-breathing radical. I've actually worked at a bank for 25 years, and that's about as boring an occupation as you can think of, right? So I'm probably like a lot of you in that respect. I don't think a lot of you are out there 24/7 trying to change things right now. And I know like one of the other people who's involved in this used to repair HVAC systems. So that's the kind of people that are involved here. We're not extraordinary in that respect at all. And I'm 60 years old. When this last few actions we did in January, there was a 79-year-old person who got arrested. So to say that you're too old is not a good excuse. And I want to say, we're losing. We are losing. And I hope you know this isn't about polar bears. It's not about, it's not about polar bears. It's not even about coral reefs. It's about food. It's about eating. It's about having water. It's about living. It's about surviving. That's what it's about. It's not some esoteric little beautiful thing out west, even though that's very important, but that's not what it's about. This is about survival. We are going extinct, and we are losing this battle. We have policies coming at our ears. There's policies. We know what we need to do. The scientists know, the politicians know, everybody knows how to solve this problem, but nobody is doing it. So what are our choices? More policies? I don't know. I was out there before this, handing out flyers, and this guy walked by and he goes, I said, you want to do something about climate change? He goes, I have solar panels, and he kept walking. And I'm like, thanks, you know? I mean, this is really desperate times, and we need your help. So please, you can do it the same way. Everybody's scared. Everybody's scared. And when people say, I'm scared, I don't want to do it, my answer is, we're all scared. We're all scared. And extinction. That's my answer. You don't have time. Extinction. That's my answer. You know, so please get involved. Thanks. He wants me to tell what it was like to go to jail. So I got arrested by the MPD, 13th in Massachusetts, and it was very cold. They did the handcuffs. They put us in this very uncomfortable truck. This thing came down. You couldn't lean forward, and you had to hold on to this little rope in the back, or else you got tossed around in the truck. And they took us to a holding cell in D.C. That wasn't so bad because I was with 2 other people who got arrested. We talked and everything, and blah, blah, blah. Of course, you don't have a belt, you don't have shoelaces, you've got, you know, all that stuff that's taken away, and the food is terrible. Usually for First Amendment things in D.C., if you get arrested for a First Amendment offense, that's kind of a different category from other crimes. So it's not as severe. And so usually people, when they get arrested, they go for a few hours, and then they get released that same day. But for us, they made us stay overnight in this central cell block in downtown DC, which is not a pleasant place to be. It's very noisy. There were roaches. There's all sorts of, you know, things. But I felt like I was doing the right thing. I felt like this is the right thing to do. I did not feel at all like I shouldn't have done this. And it was nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be, even though there was some bad people in there. But still, it was nowhere near as bad. And one of the things, as John alluded to, that I noticed is like probably 90% of the people in there are black, and yet DC is only 50% black. And that guy was here earlier. I wanted to tell him, you know, I don't know. I mean, this actually does come into the climate justice that we push here. Is, I mean, black people are 8 times more likely to have asthma. They're 2 times more likely to have COVID, to die of COVID. And then the outcomes for education, for healthcare, incarceration, for everything are worse. And that really, really does come into what we believe, because when climate change hits, the people who are going to be impacted are poor and vulnerable communities, who are disproportionately black, that's just not right. Because the problem's really being caused by all the rich people, and the poor people are going to suffer, and we all need to remember that. So anyway, I went off topic, but I'll give it back to John.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, what he was saying actually reminded me, he asked me to speak about this. So, yeah, I've been to jail 10 times. I've been arrested 10 times, and I've spent a total of like 10 or 11 days in jail, 1 time a week consecutively. And going to jail, you know, it's not fun. It's pretty terrible. Really, the worst part of it is seeing the way that the criminal justice system treats people. It treats them like animals, and it's really disturbing to see. You know, I didn't know how bad things were. You know things are bad, but I didn't really realize it until George Floyd was murdered, and that summer really, really opened my eyes. Going to jail opened my eyes a lot further. And I've heard a lot of folks, you know, like. So, for example, like you guys here, who, you know, believes that we need to work on like prison abolition or prison, you know, reform, or at least, you know, something like that. So then I would invite you to come with us and get arrested. The reason is, I got you. Yeah. The reason is because it's only by going to jail and experiencing that and being in that situation and seeing the way that people are treated that we're able to actually say that we're in solidarity. You know, that's the only way that we're able to say that we actually are anti-racist and that we're allies, when we put ourselves in the place that the people who are the most fucking oppressed in our society exist in, day in and day out. We have to see that, you know. So that's another reason why I think it is a good experience for those of us who grow up with more privilege to go through that experience, because otherwise we just don't know. And, you know, systems of oppression, right, they're able to work because of ignorance or blindness or just not thinking about it. So when we've been in that situation, then we're able to think about it. We're able to actually analyze what it is that's happening in our society. Okay, so I'm going to round out and finish up here. The last thing is a quote from David Graeber. David Graeber is a sick anarchist. Well, he passed away actually last year, but he was an awesome anarchist dude. So he wrote about, so he says here, to begin to free ourselves, the first thing we need to do is to see ourselves again as historical actors, as people who can make a difference in the course of world events. To see ourselves again as historical actors, because we are historical actors. Everyone here in this room, we are historical actors. What we do has meaning for the future, and what we don't do also has meaning for the future. The climate change isn't political. It's not, you know, about policy. It's not even about science. Climate change is about our moral responsibility as human beings, and our moral responsibility to our families, to our communities, to our country, and to the world, right? And that's what it's ultimately about. Are we going to step into our power and actually do what's necessary, like millions of people have in the past for hundreds and thousands of years? Or are we just going to let the time slip by and then be filled with self-contempt in a few years when the ball is already off the hill and we can't do anything about it? So right now, this is the time. This year, guys, 2022. And if you want to join us in this, just leave your name, phone number, email. So we're asking people to do three things, one of three things or all three. The first is come out with us, get arrested, sit on the road. You'll spend the night in jail. They'll let you out the next day. You'll have some terrible food, ham and cheese. Sorry if you're vegan. And then, so that's the first thing. The second thing is just come out and sit on the road with us and then get up after the second warning. You don't have to get arrested. But just being there, being present, that's massive. And then the last thing is to come flyer with us. If you have a couple hours, you know, every week, 2-3 hours, it would be amazing if you were able to come out, help us distribute flyers, get more people out to, you know, awesome talks like this. And that's pretty much it. So I'm just gonna finish off there. Thank you all so much for coming.
I want to say thank you so much, John, for giving that really informative and inspiring presentation. You know, I feel like I really feel inspired. Like, I feel like there's this urgency where we need to make change. We need to do something. You know, like just like myself for many years and many people out there now, you know, they agree. They see the urgency. They see that changes need to happen in society around environmentalism and so many other issues, like we're talking about, like the criminal justice system, and so many issues that we've been discussing the past few hours. And like, what really we need to do is do something. I mean, we just need to actually take action and find what method it is best for you to be a part of that change. You know, any type of support can go a long way. You know, just knowing just knowing that we have support for them and what they're doing can give them motivation, you know, just even to share their posts online, share their videos, share their content, to come out and to the demonstrations, just to stand with them in solidarity. And, you know, whatever role you feel like you have, whatever capabilities you have and network you have to be engaged in activism, you know, can make a difference. As we've been discussing, you know, it's our only option. We have to make a difference at this point, right? So I want to open up. Does anyone have anything to say in response to that great presentation? Yeah.
Aside from being scared, I feel motivated and encouraged to not be a selfish human and only think about myself, but think about the entire world. And you said like get arrested and stuff and spend some time. I actually just got out of a hospital for 10 days and staying in there was awful. It really was. I mean, they were there to help us and support us, but still the isolation and just, it was awful. And so I couldn't imagine how it would be like for someone who is in that situation, but then the people who are supposed to take care of them, they don't care. So I just couldn't imagine that. And thank you for everyone who's involved for this, what's happening right now. I'm really happy, and thank you for sharing this message. I feel very encouraged. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Does anyone have anything? Anyone else have anything to say about this presentation? Okay. Sorry about that. Wrong button. Okay, so I just want to thank you everyone who came out and saw this presentation. I hope everyone signed up for this list, you know, to get their information out there so that they can email you and contact you. So once again, if you're just coming in, this is the Sustainable Gatherings, which happens every other week here at Galactic Panther, which is an incredible art gallery here in Alexandria, Virginia. They have all of this incredible artwork, which all is for sale. If you see any artwork that inspires you, please speak to the Galactic Panther staff, which is by the front door. And all artwork sales goes towards to benefit these nonprofit organizations. So, and if you want to give back, we are taking donations, and you can also purchase some artwork to take home, and all the sales goes towards these environmentalism and other positive ways. So thank you guys for all coming in. Thank you so much. This is the Open Mic Sustainable Gathering. We are collecting donations, which goes towards the nonprofit organizations. We're selling artwork all over the walls, which goes to support these causes. So please do what you can to support. Give us your email, purchase some artwork, make a donation, have a slice of pizza, whatever you can do to help us out. We're here to create that community. I want to thank you guys so much for coming out and sharing what you have to say. This is an open mic, so I'm going to open up the list, which is right here. And if you want to share some music and some art, some ideas, then please come on up and you can sign up for the open mic. Once again, thank you, John and Paul and Donald, for giving that incredible presentation. So once again, this is the Sustainable Gatherings, which is a bi-weekly event here at Galactic Panther. It's all about positivity and creating a space for conversations, for activism, and for humanitarianism and consciousness and artwork. If you see any art that you enjoy, please let us know, because it's all for sale and it all supports the nonprofit organizations. We're also taking donations, suggested donation of $5 to $15. There's a beautiful bucket by the front door. And we're opening up the open mic list, so if you have anything to say, just some ideas, a poem, a music piece, or you have some artwork you want to share, please sign up for the open mic. once again. This is an open mic. This is a sustainable gatherings, which happens every other week right here at Galactic Panther in Alexandria, the beautiful art gallery. If you're enjoying this conversation and the presence of these nonprofit organizations, then please make a donation at the front door. We're collecting donations, which goes to a cause. This is also a promotional event for the Sustainable Dream Festival. It's a multi-day festival on Earth Day, April 21st to 24th in Dulles Airport, near in Middleburg. Yeah, it's 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You can camp or you can go home. It's really right in Loudoun County, so it's not that far. It's only like 45 minutes from here. We got flyers about the festival, about the sustainable gatherings, and more information about Galactic Panther. Check out the artwork. All the artwork here is for sale. If you see anything that inspires you, please let us know. You can take home all of this artwork. This is also the exhibit closing event. So if you see any artwork on the wall, you gotta grab it today because we're gonna be changing up all the artwork for next week. So